Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give a few minutes. We do have a high number of attendees today, and people are starting to enter. So we're just going to give it a minute or two to let everybody in. Okay, Alicia, I'll call on you. I see the numbers are starting to level off. Are we able to begin? Great, thank you. Okay, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, and depending on where you are joining us from today. My name is Joanne St. Goddard, and I'm the Executive Director of the Circular Innovation Council. We're very pleased that you've taken time out of your day to join this webinar, and we're very excited about providing the details of the work that we're doing in the organics waste sector, in particular diversion in the IC&I sector. So for those of you who are unaware of the backdrop to this research or have not yet seen the report, this is a precursor to its release, where we're really focused on investigating barriers, drivers, and opportunities that influence diversion of organic waste in Canada's IC&I sector. So I'm joined by Maggie Bain, who is our lead in not only the food waste pilot work across the country, which is really the backbone to some of the research that we undertook, but also really led the research and the research team. So we're very pleased, and our agenda today is really about focusing on the newly to be released report. But we're also blessed to have a number of different municipal leaders who are working on organics waste reduction and diversion in the IC&I sector in their own right. And so we're going to invite them for a brief discussion on our findings of the research itself and learn a little bit about the changing role, as we would describe it, between the municipal sector and its services in the industrial, commercial, institutional sector. So before I begin, one housekeeping item, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Circular Innovation Council if you've not that familiar with us and our work. We are blessed with a very healthy crowd today, and many that are coming from all parts of Canada, and a few international guests as well. And so although the webinar will be delivered in English, we acknowledge that we do have attendees whose first language is not English. And so we are providing through this Wordly app the ability for live translation, French and otherwise. So if for those of you who would prefer to choose your mother tongue as opposed to English, please, you should see in the invite in your Zoom chat bar to participate. And if you would instead like, so that's, if you click on open here, you'll see the prompt on your screen. If that is your choice, you will see the live translation on your computer screen. If your preference is to use your phone, you can scan the QR code on the screen here. And so I will give a couple of seconds for folks who are choosing that option to go ahead and do so. But please, we are limited to 50 people. So if your dominant language is English, we would prefer you not to use the Wordly app as we are limited by numbers as well. So a couple of minutes just to let people sort of get situated on the app itself. Okay, if you're still having trouble using Wordly, please just dump a note into the chat function, and I know Alicia will be able to give you some help. Okay, with that, we'll begin. So we first want to start, of course, with our land acknowledgement. And we want to thank the more than 630 First Nations, their people and ancestors who are the traditional stewards of this land, now called Canada, in which we share and gather here today. We acknowledge the historical oppression of these lands, peoples, and cultures of this country, and we know we have a role to play in challenging the legacies of colonization. Circular economy principles are not new. The idea of sustainable resource systems, proper land stewardship, and respect for both human and environmental ecosystems is not an innovative and new concept. It has always been core to Indigenous teachings, and we acknowledge that today. So without further ado, as I've mentioned, a little bit about my organization. We are the Circular Innovation Council, and we were established originally as the Recycling Council of Ontario in 1978. And in that capacity, for almost 4 decades, we really focused on improving end-of-life management, looking at policies, research, programs to support improvements of diversion from landfill, of reduction of waste, of resource efficiency. But in 2020, we saw an opportunity to take all of that historical knowledge and market information and policy experience to expand our organization and become the Circular Innovation Council with a now new, broader mandate expanded across Canada. So our works and demonstrated by the number of pilots that we are undertaking in the food waste alone across Canada, and in fact, looking more now upstream to production and consumption systems that really lend themselves to supporting a circular economy and realizing the triple bottom line benefits of a circular economy, not only environmental protection, but also economic opportunity, as well as social benefits to people. So with that new broad mandate, we really work in 3 pillars. Um, uh, we develop a lot of programs and pilots. This is really about examining in the marketplace opportunities to improve linear systems, to test solutions. We bring, in our unique independent role, the private and the public sector together that have interest in solving common problems. And with that, we create solutions and offer those solutions up in our resources and services, whether they be educational or empowering change, information and data. And we also take those learnings and work to advocate for effective policies that are really about finding opportunities to introduce policy interventions to change market design towards circularity. So it's these 3 areas or pillars of work, if you like, that are really connected that we work within. We are a membership-based organization. If you are interested in knowing more about how to become a member of the organization, if you're not today, we'd be keen to chat to you about that. We do have a diversity of member types, both in the public, private, academia, other non-for-profit organizations, as well as Canadians, as well as individuals. We'd be keen to chat to you about becoming a member of the organization and really supporting and getting involved in our work. So with that really quick introduction, I will hand it over to Maggie, who is going to lead the bulk of the presentation related to the research. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Joe, for the intro, and thank you for everyone for joining us today. Before starting, I wanted to also thank the other members of our research team here today, Aurora Mattiocci and Savina Caporali, for all their hard work in the creation of this very comprehensive piece of research, as well as all the participating ICI stakeholders and municipal representatives that volunteered their time for interviews as a place to share their experiences. So this research report will be publicly shared and released tomorrow, like Joanne said. All of the attendees of this webinar will receive an email with a link to the recording of this presentation, as well as a link to the published report on CIC's website. So now to today's agenda. Today we'll be taking you through the purpose of the work and the background on organics diversion in Canada's ICI sector. We'll also be presenting our key findings from the research and interpretation of those findings. After that, there will be a few minutes for a chance for audience Q&A, of which you can, as we're going along, type your questions in the Q&A box provided. And then we'll be moving on to a panel discussion with municipal representatives who we'll introduce later on to share their experiences as a way to frame continuing dialogue on this topic. So to get into it, the purpose of this work was to generate information and knowledge to further support ongoing efforts by the Government of Canada to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from Canada's waste sector. Specifically, this work was used to establish a better understanding of the current perspectives on the factors and experiences that can influence diversion of organic waste in Canada's IC&I sector. And the objective of our research was to develop a report, which we will be releasing soon, that includes detailed information, knowledge, and perspectives, as well as recommendations on the opportunities, barriers, and drivers that can influence diversion of organics in Canadian IC&I sectors. And in that, also identifying areas for potential federal government intervention and support. So this report will contribute to an analysis of these gaps, as well as identifying those potential intervention areas to hopefully support and advance diversion of organic waste across Canada. So for those who aren't familiar, a little bit of background on the IC&I sector and how it relates to organics diversion. The ICI sector is Canada's largest generator of food and organic waste, producing an estimated 14 million tons annually. The organic waste represents approximately 30% of the current waste disposal stream and takes up a lot of landfill capacity, which, as we know, across the country is definitely a limitation. It also creates potent methane emissions when landfilled that are calculated to be about 84 times stronger than CO2e is over 20 years. So for the current state of ICI organics diversion, which was kind of part of the lead up to our research, despite the limitations of landfill capacities, as well as our limitations, as we're well aware, on various resources and economic loss, and methane emission generation, ICI organics diversion remains fairly low across the country. Most organics diversion policies and municipal services target households, as in residential sector, and not the non-residential sector, which is mostly ICI facilities. So ICI diversion programs and services are often private sector based and can be costly for those generators to implement on their own. And part of why this problem is perpetuated is that data specific to ICI diversion is quite scarce. So it's a large data gap across the country. It makes it very difficult for governments to plan policy and programs, as well as industry, haulers, processors, and the ICI sector themselves to understand their own food waste and organic waste generation diversion in order to be able to plan strategies, policy, and programs to help mitigate that. So the very low organic waste diversion from the ICI sector across the country is both a disposal and a climate problem. So the waste side of things, as well as the climate side of things, as we mentioned, contribute to a lot of methane emissions, a lot of lost resources, and increasing pressure on land use. I already mentioned these a little bit, but just to go over what our objectives and methods were during this research. So we wanted to assess whether municipalities have sufficient authority to impose regulatory controls to divert their ICI organic waste. So this was investigated through conducting a jurisdictional scan of organic waste regulations at municipal and provincial territorial levels. By our research team. And then next, we wanted to identify municipal and ICI perspectives on the opportunities, barriers, and drivers for organics diversion across the sector. And this will be the what we heard part of the report and the presentation, which is primarily built from 14 municipal representative interviews and 8 ICI sector interviews across the varying regions and sectors across the country. And then also for comparisons of past research and also some of the expertise CIC has with our organic waste pilots in different areas of the country. And we wanted to take what we learned from that research and identify related observations and lessons that it could be kind of compared against with our organic waste pilots, as well as existing key studies that are already out there. who we engaged for this research. Apart from the jurisdictional scan, we also engaged municipalities of varying size, geography, and regulatory environments to make sure that we got a broad scope of what we were looking at. So this can include municipalities both with and without ICI waste diversion regulations or provincial landfill bans in place. And then the ICI generators spanned food service, retail, as in grocery retail, healthcare industries, post-secondary institutions, as well as processing and manufacturing. We were also able to talk with some industry associations, luckily, that were representing the food generating sectors. And we tried our best to get a diverse geographic coverage across the western, central, eastern, and northern parts of Canada. So I'm going to move into the key findings here and hand it off to one of our research team leads, Savina, to go over the kind of high-level summary and jurisdictional scan aspects. And then I will jump back in for the what we heard.
Thank you, Maggie. So I'll start by presenting some of the high-level results of the jurisdictional scan. If we can move to the next slide. So starting with an overview, we found that progress on waste diversion has been uneven across regions. There are challenges around coordinating what different stakeholders are doing. And by stakeholders, we mean those of municipalities, provincial governments, ICI sector, and haulers, and ensuring they're all working together towards the same goal. This reinforces the need for strong governance and policy alignment to accelerate collective action among these stakeholders. Then there's also limitations and challenges for individual stakeholders. So when looking at municipalities, they deal with ever-evolving guidance from provinces, capacity constraints, and lack of infrastructure to process waste, such as anaerobic digestion facilities. Provinces and territories are focused on their jurisdictions, which would limit alignment across provinces and territories. And then the ICI sector would need to pay a high price to invest in waste diversion, and therefore need clear long-term guidance and better access to diversion systems and infrastructure before making those investments. Similarly, haulers delay investment, waiting for a volume of waste from the ICI sector that makes collection more efficient and economically feasible. Next slide, please. So we found that Canada's regulatory environment for ICI organic waste diversion is fragmented across regions and government levels with no coordinated frameworks at the provincial and municipal level. So looking at these different categories on the right here, so authority and policy scope, we found that municipalities can introduce their own ICI organic waste-related bylaws conferred by the province, but provincial territorial laws influence their scope and motivation. In terms of infrastructure and service models, access to processing infrastructure and service availability varies across regions, and few municipalities offer dedicated collection services to the ICI sector. Most generators have to seek private waste hauling services. For cost structures and incentives, very few municipalities offer diversion services or financial incentives for the ICI sector, and some regions disincentivize landfilling through organics bans, and 2 provinces, Quebec and Manitoba, enacted landfill levies to disincentivize landfilling and recover costs to fund organics programs. Next slide. In terms of oversight and compliance, some municipalities require on-site audits of bins or waste management plans, to name a few. However, limited municipal resources often reduce capacity for effective enforcement for the ICI sector. For education and capacity building, regions that have bylaws for the ICI sector, they use staff training, sorting signage, and educational mandates as some of the tools, but they do vary by region. For coordination and partnerships, the extent to which municipalities can incorporate public-private partnerships, intermunicipal coordination, and shared infrastructure to manage waste also vary across jurisdictions. So ultimately, the result is that performance varies widely and systemic alignment is missing. This leads to fragmented participation across stakeholders and uneven ICI organics diversion outcomes and performance across Canada. Where organics diversion is expensive, uncoordinated, and not regulated, generators often default to landfilling. So now I'll pass it back to Maggie to discuss what we heard from municipal and ICI sector stakeholders.
Thanks, Savina. So this part included our interviewees, our municipal and ICI interviewees, and them being able to share kind of the on-the-ground realities of the experience. So this was shared in the context of similar barriers, drivers, and opportunities that were found during the jurisdictional scan. And these were, for the most part, actually aligned between municipal and ICI representatives, despite those two groups playing different roles within the system. So from our research, what we identified high level as the core levers to impacting organics diversion in Canada's ICI sector were regulatory alignment and policy support, infrastructure investments, financial incentives and cost reductions, data collection and transparency in that data itself, education and capacity building across both municipal, ICI, and industry stakeholders, as well as collaboration and engagement across the stakeholder groups mentioned. So public, private, industry, all need to be aligned and have to actually have a system that works to facilitate that working together in order to be able to collaborate on advancing these systems. So I'll be kind of diving into each of these from what we heard and get a little bit into the details of what our interviewees were telling us. So this will be kind of a combination of both the municipal and IC&I stakeholders. If you are interested in any differences that were said between them or specifics of what each group provided us, that will be split up in the report. So for regulatory alignment and policy support, some barriers that were commonly mentioned were inconsistent regulations and definitions across jurisdictions, meaning both municipal and provincial. A lack of enforcement makes existing policies largely ineffective, and this is often a capacity issue when it comes to enforcing these. And then sometimes a lack of provincial mandate or guidance or adequate regional processing capacity can also stall municipal action, which in itself then stalls the rest of the system from moving along. For drivers of advancing this, provincial diversion targets would be useful to enable municipal regulation and spur private sector investment. And local mandates and bylaws also help reduce that landfill pressure that help drive those systems forward. For opportunities in advancing this, being able to align policy across government levels with the on-the-ground IC&I realities of what they are experiencing, which includes definitions of materials to be diverted, standards that they need to be meeting for bylaws or data reporting, as well as targets and being able to communicate those, whether they are from the municipality, from the province, from the federal level, etc. And then there are also large opportunities in this to link ICR organics diversion, not just as a waste reduction strategy, but also as a climate strategy, and that they are one and the same. So moving on to infrastructure investment as one of the next levers. Some of the barriers we heard on that is that across the country, there's generally insufficient processing capacity for feedstock material, especially in the rural and northern regions. There's high capital investment going into these and permitting costs, as well as just permitting logistics of land that often deter development. Even though the development can move forward, it is a lot of staff time and capacity from municipalities and industry to invest in these types of infrastructure. And also when there's not a lot of infrastructure, the distances between the options for processing become very long. And so they tend to increase hauling costs a lot, and the increase in those hauling costs then through no fault of the haulers themselves, does not provide an accessible system for the ICI sector to want to participate in because it's so expensive. So for drivers, participants were talking about municipal ability and perception of their own ability to be able to implement policy and programs improves and increases when infrastructure is accessible and nearby regionally. And opportunities in the future for advancing this forward is more investment in regional composting, AD facilities, and circular end management markets, and helping to facilitate cooperation between municipalities regionally, as these facilities are often shared. Developing mobile or modular solutions for generators, especially in larger city centers where it is difficult for waste management trucks to get in, or in rural and northern regions where there is that increased long distance between processing facilities. As well as supporting public-private partnerships and shared infrastructure use. So being able to facilitate those relationships between the public and the private sector will likely help that coordination and cooperation moving forward. Our third lever is financial incentives and cost reductions. The barriers that came up is that, as was previously mentioned about the expense of organic collections themselves, they are usually 50 to 100% more costly than disposal to landfill. So although sometimes the larger corporate entities in the ICI sector can access these systems, it is still expensive for them. And then SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises, are often quite priced out of the system itself. And they lack the financial resources or scale to implement diversion in their regions. For the drivers, there is, shared regional collection services lowers the cost through improved efficiency of collection routes using an economies of scale concept regionally. So that's some of the work that I'll be talking about later with CIC's pilot programs. Another good driver is incentives, so grants and subsidies to help reduce the barriers and participation for SMEs in the first place, whether it's financial or logistical help or a combination helps provide that kind of like support net underneath for them. Opportunities moving forward. Is to pilot some regional programs to try and test out incentives, figure out the barriers, figure out how to overcome some of these. One of these is CIC's model of pilot regional cost sharing collection models or early adopters rebate programs that some municipalities do that precede regulations in order to set the system up for success once those may come along. We, could also offer long-term regional contracts to attract private haulers or investors to participate in the development and design and implementation of new systems or programs. Especially if there is something like a preferred hauler or processor list, if they're in collaborative relationships with organizations or public entities. Sorry, this one's a little bit cut off. The fourth pillar of data collection and transparency. Barriers that came up quite a bit are there's no real mechanism to compel reporting at the point of generation of the ICI facilities themselves. And this is one of the things that causes the large data gap. There's also lack of consistent data tracking or reporting for ICI organics across like the haulers and processors themselves. They have not been provided a framework to do so. And so there needs to be some sort of structure underneath if we want that to be like a comprehensive and repeatable data set to use moving forward. Haulers are also, rarely encouraged or incentivized to share diversion or contamination data. When we do get data sets, they do tend to be aggregated either with residential and ICI combined together, or there are sometimes inconsistent tracking methods across different hauling and processing companies, which tends to create incomplete data sets. Drivers to move this forward, businesses and municipalities are seeking waste diversion and climate performance metrics. So there is incentive to start to explore solutions to be able to gather this type of data together. And having this type of data also supports more informed policy and investment decisions. So when municipalities in particular know how much their ICI sector is generating or diverting, this helps them understand, how they're needing to build a policy and support around that. And then for opportunities, there could be built into things like this, like mandated regional hauler or business diversion reporting was one of the suggestions from some of our participants, as well as investments either from the public or private sector in accessible tracking platforms, tools, smart tech, like AI sorting systems, as well as shared data collection platforms for the ICI sector and industry stakeholders to access. Our fifth pillar is education and capacity building. So our interviewees brought up that many ICI facilities are unaware of best practices for being able to implement diversion programs or meeting regulatory requirements. And this becomes like a very large weight on them, I guess, to take on. And they want to make sure that they're getting it right. And so sometimes it is easiest to just provide them guidance in the first place. There's also the high staff turnover rate in food service sector, which reduces effectiveness of some of this, like in-house, training, implementation of diversion programs is the increased staff time and energy to retrain as the high staff turnover moves along. And then also that contamination within the feedstock itself when it is diverted is often due to a lack of signage or staff training. So coming up with proper methods to provide that education. And having that education would help increase participation in the ICI sector. It also improves the quality of source separation, which lowers the cost for haulers, lowers the cost for processors, and overall makes the system more accessible. And also providing clear signage, staff engagement to build a workplace culture around diversion, which is sometimes easier in the cities that already have residential diversion in place as they are used to it. And then opportunities moving forward to improve some of these systems are providing multilingual and sector-specific toolkits and training, as we cannot paint the ICI sector with one large brush, when we're thinking about developing these things out. And also mandating staff and public education as part of diversion programs, which some cities that have collection and diversion mandates have already implemented. And then lastly, collaboration and engagement. So our interviewees brought up often that ICI generators, haulers, processors, municipalities often all operate in silos. So there's not often a lot of coordination and communication facilitated between them, which causes limited coordination in advancing these systems forward as the efficiency of them is reduced. Drivers, we've got cross-sector engagement being critical for moving these systems forward. It helps strengthen system design, helps strengthen ICI participant uptake in diversion. And running things like multi-stakeholder pilots help build this trust and participation between government sectors, ICI sectors, as well as the service providers that are a part of that. And then opportunities moving forward are facilitating these co-design processes and public-private regional partnerships for designing systems and sharing infrastructure. Creating municipal working groups and communities of practice to align strategies and share data with each other. Understanding what everyone else is doing sometimes helps spark ideas for moving the systems forward in your own region. And further investments in multi-stakeholder pilot projects for testing these scalable ICI organic waste management solutions is also key. So I'm going to briefly speak on kind of this research that we did in comparison to some of our expertise, some of CIC's expertise in running the IC&I organics diversion pilots and insights that we've gained from those. When this research was conducted, we had just wrapped up running some of these pilot projects in Guelph-Wellington region in Ontario and West Loch Strathcona County region in Alberta. Both of the pilots leveraged regional economies of scale. So we went into the regions and worked with municipalities and the ICI sector, as well as industry partnerships to group businesses together in a region on shared collection routes and services, and really leverage that kind of group buying power regionally. So from these pilots, we found that it improved regional participation of the ICI sector diverting. And most of the participants in our pilots had never diverted organics before. By having these shared collection routes and services, this dropped the cost a little bit. So there was less of a price disparity between landfilling costs and organics collection costs. So this improved affordability, also improved participation regionally, as well as SME access to these diversion services. Advisory support from our teams, as well as our municipal partners, was critical for the ICI participants in their setup, compliance, and diversion performance. Within these pilots, we also have methods to track participant diversion data, which helps fill that kind of national data gap we were talking about earlier. And this enables performance monitoring of the individual participants themselves, and they receive impact reporting back so they understand their own diversion, but also collected together in a larger data set. It helps the municipalities understand what their ICI sector is diverting. You know, some of the feedback that we would get from these participants is that pilots that were implemented pre-regulation helped both the ICI sector and then the local governments themselves help prepare for decision-making in developing and designing mandates or future programming. So in comparison to our research in this presentation, we did find that even with subsidies and support from these pilots that I described, although the participation increased, the voluntary participation still stayed quite low without any sort of municipal or regional regulation or mandate acting as a top-down incentive to divert. So from this, we think that the combination of the two, this kind of bottom-up support and subsidy and better access to the system for the ICI sector, paired with a top-down incentive for guidance and structure and framework of how to move forward, would be ideal. And then lastly, before I hand it back to Joanne for a short kind of overall interpretation of the findings, we also wanted to compare the current research that we did to past research that is already out there. There have in the past been two major national government studies conducted that also identified consistent systemic barriers similar to what we talked about here. So this includes challenges with policy coordination, infrastructure unavailability, high cost, unclear governance roles, siloed decision-making between stakeholders, and those data gaps. These studies themselves have been out for about 5 to 8 years. So what we found in our work, you know, these challenges are not new. They have already been acknowledged in this past work, and our experience is that the municipalities and ICI sectors are consistently going through. The fact that, you know, 5 to 8 years ago, these same sorts of challenges were being brought up, although progress has definitely happened across the country, it seems to be quite incremental. And consistency between our research findings and past national studies signals perhaps a strategic moment for governments and stakeholders to move forward together in a coordinated fashion and help accelerate the system's change through coordinated policy action, cross-sector strategizing, as well as intergovernmental collaboration.
Thanks, Maggie. Savina, such a dearth and breadth of information. So many threads to pull on here. So really appreciate the comprehensive report of a very lengthy piece of research. So just going to try summarize, because I know that we've really deluged a lot of information on you here, but just to sort of give you a summary of the interpretations of some of these findings. Next slide, please. It really comes down to sort of 6 key areas. A system-wide inaction, which was described originally by, or initially by Maggie, where we've got all of the stakeholders. We know who all the stakeholders are, but they're all sort of stuck in inaction, each waiting on the other to move first. And so that's why there's really not been much progress made. And so one of the reasons we undertook this piece of work is to try to ascertain sort of who should be leading this? At what level of government can we think about policy intervention? What are the layout of the IC&I sector? And we certainly know that in many areas it's predominantly SMEs who can't afford or unable or don't have the capacity to be able to implement organics diversion. And so how do we help them? What are the threads we pull on there? So the sort of system-wide inaction was definitely, one of the early observations. As is always the case when you don't have a system in place that is under regulation, we don't have good data. There is tremendous and rich and accurate data on organics collection in the residential sector, but we can't enjoy that in the IC&I sector, predominantly because, as Maggie has indicated, they are serviced by the private sector, and there's nothing compelling or incenting them to share that data. And so part of why we undertake the pilot projects is to try to tease some of that data out and look for those trends. As was explained by Maggie, even with incentives, lower costs, we are seeing sort of a bit of uptick, but voluntary efforts alone are certainly not enough. We have proven out, I think, with our pilot projects and then coupled with this research that regulatory intervention is certainly needed to get the economies of scale that were needed in order for us to be able to create the amount of organics that's needed to justify the expensive capital expenditures, and also applying equity across a systems approach at a community level as well. Collaboration, which is at the heart of our pilot projects, trying to bring together at a community-based approach the idea of all sizes and types of IC&I generator, because they're very varied across the spectrum, and trying to create a program that can satisfy all of their needs, and we cannot do that without collaboration, and starting to bridge the gap between the private hauler and the public sector regulator or service provider. And so in that triangulation, this is the spirit of the pilot projects and trying to build this community-based shared pooled model approach. And then we talked at length about policy interventions, who can intervene with them, where should they be intervened, what type of policy, whether it's waste diversion, whether it's connected to climate change, and how should that policy be written to try to onboard en masse. And this chicken and egg problem that you have a little bit around not having the infrastructure in place and therefore not applying a regulation, but without regulation, you don't have the tonnage that you need in order to justify the capital expenditures. And so, policy has to really entertain that reality. And then linking IC&I organics diversion to climate change and circular economy roadmaps. We're seeing a lot on the production side, so food and food waste and food loss in the production cycle, but we're not seeing the same attention being paid to end-of-life management of organics. And so we certainly need to make those linkages in a circular economy context. But they are the biggest greenhouse gas and most powerful with their methane at landfill, and yet they are not commonly connected to community or provincial, or in some cases even the national policies for climate and climate change. So a big flag for us, and one that we think we can draw more attention to, and therefore unlocking the funding to sort of work on this policy alignment and an overarching public engagement and education support. So those are the six big pillars, if you will, and all the sub notes that Savina and Maggie gave in their presentation. I'm happy. I think we do have a little bit of time if I'm right. We've got about 15 minutes or so, 13 minutes to entertain some of the questions that are starting to come in. I please encourage you all to use the Q&A function, and thanks for those who have already started. So I'll read these out, and if I could ask my colleagues, Maggie, Savina, if you could help out with some of the answers, that would be fantastic. First question, are there grant subsidies that are currently available for SMEs in the GTA? I don't know if that's something that was just maybe unearthed in your interviews or something that you might know from the pilot project work or any other Canadian jurisdiction to participate in organics collection. And if so, please share them.
I can take this one to the best of my ability. So for the GTA in particular, I do not believe there are any like financial subsidies currently. I know the City of Toronto has an ICR organics collection specific program, and the users of it pay into the program as a utility fee. So if you're in the City of Toronto, there is that option. Otherwise, I am happy to, if you'd like to email me later, I can send you some information about the various Canada-wide grants.
Thanks, Maggie. I'm not sure that we have the capacity to answer this question, but I'll read it out loud for thought-provoking. Sam asks, would cities pay haulers for fine-grained data? So I'm assuming it's sort of verified data is what you mean by fine-grained. That's how I take it, including diversion and contamination, or better phrase, did any city state that they would be willing to pay for this? So maybe you can answer the second part of the question first, and we can maybe even when we move into our conversations with the actual municipal reps, we can throw that at them.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Yes, to answer the question to the best of our ability, it did not come up specifically about an intervention to pay haulers or processors for this information. Municipal representatives can answer this better than me. My guess would be that if we dug into the conversation a little bit, those that are currently looking into building out incentives, partnerships, programs, it has likely come up in their own internal conversations. And I think that, having some sort of financial or business model related incentive for haulers and processors to use reporting systems that are provided to them as an incentive to actually report in would be a good system to use. But yeah, maybe the municipal reps can jump in on that question a little bit later.
Super. Sarah, hi Sarah, thanks for joining. After reaching economies of scale to make it more affordable for businesses to join the program, and this is really about the pilot project specifically, Maggie, what was the approximate cost increase? And I'm respectful that it ranges across the country, given the cost of disposal and diversion is different. So what was the approximate cost increase they still incurred in comparison to landfilling? And maybe you can speak about whether in the pilot projects you were able. I know we attempted to try to gather as much of that baselining on cost of disposal as we possibly could for comparison's sake, but you didn't always get it. Curious if there was an upset threshold of increase they were willing to incur. So was there a price uptick from disposal, and did that sit well?
That's a great question. Yeah, once again, happy to, if you'd like to email me, talk about this in more detail. But broadly, the answer is it kind of varies between our pilot regions. So the two that we have conducted, although we have two of the pilots currently just launching in Regina and Edmonton. The two that we have done in the past, the structure or this, I guess, initial price disparity between regions is quite different. So Ontario, the price for, I guess, waste collection versus organics collection is quite large. Earlier in the notes, there was a very large range of 50 to 100% higher. And so, having a cost of disposal at the time, granted this was 2021, so it has likely changed since then, for the Ontario pilot being around $10 to $12 per 240-liter cart for disposal. That's the big kind of residential size ones that you're thinking of. Up to the, I guess, like after the group sharing cost for a regional expansion that we did off of Guelph in Wellington County. Those prices were around like $28, $29 with like a very good partnership with the hauler that was willing to incur a little bit of those expenses themselves to get their foot in the door. Things like that, and then to continue running a model like that, which was the case in Guelph, Wellington, but isn't always the case. A little bit of an overhead was built on for organizational management of it. So that is quite a large disparity. And when we try and put the initial program in place, any subsidies, if the system is going to be subsidized, we do try and like get the cost down to like match disposal as much as possible so that there is, I guess, less of a risk or less of a barrier for the new participants that are just starting to divert. There's less of that kind of disparity starting out for them. The Strathcona County and Westlock region pilot is a good example of costs that participants were willing to incur, so like afterwards. So we had the price down around $15 per cart per collection for organics, which was a little bit higher than disposal, probably by $7 or $8, but not too much. And then they were okay with a price jump of about $5 afterward. We found that was about the limit. We had a few people withdraw, but also we had a few people join afterwards after the county started managing it. So yeah, it's kind of depends on the facilities situation, the ICI facilities situation sometimes themselves.
Thanks for that. Businesses are next questions from Matt, who I think the vantage point here is as a regional government. So working to, and he says, implement regulation while providing rebates and subsidies. So program in the works, it sounds like, and regulatory mechanisms to be explored. But businesses seem, he says, extremely reluctant to change waste practices, citing cost and logistical barriers to participation. It's nothing new. It was part of the barriers that you had indicated in the research. Through pilots and research, what message seemed to stick the best with businesses when implementing regulation and incentives to drive participation at scale?
Sorry, Joe, I accidentally muted you instead of unmuting myself. Yeah, I'll once again answer this to the best of my ability. So referring back to the pilots themselves, I can talk about messaging because I am not a municipal representative myself, nor have implemented a bylaw. I can't talk at length about what messaging might resonate on that side between municipal and ICI sector. But through the pilots, what we found was the most successful in getting voluntary participation was some of the targeting of ICI facilities, various brands that were already kind of looking for a solution or already had kind of sustainability, eco community mindset branding within, their own communications and marketing. That's the image that they put out there. So I would say a good chunk of the voluntary participation was probably a small business owner wanting to do a good thing and having control over their own margins, which sometimes will walk into a place and the owner will be like, this is excellent. However, I have to go through 5 layers of corporate in order to have this approved, and there is a limited time frame on our pilots often, so sometimes that time frame just doesn't fit inside of it. But yeah, being able to offer them impact reporting was a huge one. That's something that participants have really, really liked over the pilot, and it is because they have something tangible to look at, which behavior change wise is good to be able to tangibly measure your own progress and show staff that something actionable is happening. It's good for staff engagement. And also if they had any public facing reporting or promotion of that sort of community-facing sustainability branding. They could talk about their participation in the pilot, and they have tangible impacts to share. And also on the back end, if they have any corporate sustainability or environmental or social reporting to do, then it helps with that aspect as well. So I'd say the promotion and impact reporting were probably like the largest motivators, messaging wise, when we were trying to get them to be recruited, and what we got from their feedback later on.
And as an add-on to that, Maggie, was it irrespective of size and type of generator, whether it's a small restaurant or a deli, or whether it was a corporate franchise that's part of a corporate entity, was that KPI reporting and information flow back to them as important, irrespective of the type?
Yeah, that seemed to be the case in the feedback we got. It varied in how they used it, but the importance of it to them and the usefulness of it to them was kind of the same across ICI types and sizes.
Which is currently what, is unavailable to them given the type of service they get today. So that makes sense. I hope that, Claire, I'm trying to group some of these questions because we only have 2 minutes left in this segment. Claire, I hope that answers your question as well, because it was very similar. So if you want an add on to yours, please just dump it in and we'll add another question if that doesn't answer it, and we'll try to get to it. From Rana, given the significant decrease in organic diversion rates in the IC&I sector between 2020 and 2022, and then 2023, as reported by StatsCan, do you believe this reflects a shift in how messaging or outreach is being communicated to the sector? What factors do you think are influencing the downward trend? It's a global question. And I think you can fall back certainly on the findings, and then maybe just your gut, Maggie, and I can help out if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. No, I'll give a quick comment on it, then feel free to jump in. The decrease, I think, in terms of the messaging part, I think future messaging moving forward, like we are seeing in a shift kind of across the country, is perhaps to shift towards more of an economic mindset, more of like an investment mindset, more of a benefit for the individual business or brand mindset and messaging. And I think some of the factors that aren't just affecting the ICR organics diversion part, they are the same factors that are kind of affecting everything, which is really affordability. So as especially over COVID, especially grocery stores and restaurants, as their margins shrunk when they were struggling to make it to the other side of things, their ability to invest in sustainability practices, extra waste diversion practices, even if they wanted to ethically, was sometimes not practically in the cards for them.
Yeah, that makes all kinds of sense, and that really hovers over that time frame. And some of them those that survived it took years to recover from it. So it's without a regulatory push, it was a nice to have, not a must have. So yeah, the affordability piece is really important. Okay, last one. Referring to staff turnover and training challenges, how has earlier education intervention around organics diversion awareness, primary, secondary schooling levels been considered? I think that's really tough to make the link there. But if you have a comment on that one, Maggie,
I can give a kind of a brief comment. This wasn't particularly material that was covered in depth through the research, but there are other studies in other areas that aren't related to waste by diversion, but perhaps are related to food waste reduction and diversion, other sustainability and environmental behaviors that public and high school level education and messaging about these systems and how they relate to waste and how they relate to climate and how they relate to land across the country is really, really vital. It's educating people early on that will be the decision makers later in our society.
Agreed. And I'll just echo, the disconnect to climate and climate policy. And we know many municipalities, over 400 of them across the country, have climate emergency plans. And very rarely have we seen organics as a target sort of linked into them, whether they choose to apply regulation or to organize services. It's just a missing link. So that's a really important call out as well. Okay, so we're at time with the Q&A as I understand it, because we did want to leave some time for our guest panelists to react to what they've heard, and to introduce them if they could come on camera and unmic, that would be great. We are very blessed to have three leading practitioners and leaders in their own right, in leading their cities and municipalities around improving organics collection and diversion from landfill. And we asked them to assemble with us today to make sure that we promote their leadership and learn a little bit more about what they're doing in their communities, but also a little bit of a reaction to this research that CIC's undertaken. So maybe if we can start by way of introduction, we have Alison Abbink, and I think what I'll do, if it's okay for everybody, we'll introduce the three of you and I'll give your bios collectively, and then we can plow right into the questions. So we have with us Alison Abbink from the city of Edmonton. She is a senior policy planner from the city, and someone that is passionate, clearly, about sustainability, strategy, and systems. She has supported a variety of strategic projects in her position, including the development of a 25-year waste strategy. You don't see that very often. That's long and broad. A communal collection program for apartments and condos, and an implementation of a single-use item reduction bylaw. Thanks for joining us, Alison. Willow Iorga from the city of Regina is a coordinator of education and outreach for the city's water, waste, and environmental department. She has a master's degree in education from the University of Regina and has over 10 years of experience teaching in various educational settings. She later transitioned into program supervision, leading community initiatives that promote sustainability and waste reduction, specifically with a strong background in research, community engagement, and program development. Willow is also passionate about fostering environmental awareness and empowering residents to take action for a greener Regina. Welcome. And last but not least, Marian Maltais-Guilbault from the city of Montreal is a senior planning advisor to the city's environment department. She brings strong expertise with waste management developed at provincial level, which is now she's now applying to many municipal challenges in Montreal. She leads innovative projects focused on reducing waste, improving organics, waste recycling, and also advancing textile circularity. And through her strategic vision and deep commitment, Marianne plays an active role in helping with the city's achieving its zero waste objectives as well. So welcome, ladies. Thanks very much for taking time. Just given the short time we have, if it's okay with you, I've got three questions that I just want to ask each of you as an extension of the Q&A that we just had, a very active Q&A from our delegation. And get your thoughts in terms of the findings that you heard in the presentation today. So maybe we'll start with Marianne, and then we'll go to Willow, and then finally Alison. Can you describe a little bit your municipality's current function and objectives as it relates to specifically supporting IC&I organics diversion? Go ahead, Marianne.
Sure. Well, Montreal's goal in supporting IC&I organics diversion is, we could say, twofold. It has there's environmental leadership on one side and also economic efficiency. And from an environmental perspective, our actions are aligned with the Quebec government's objectives there's the Politique québécoise de gestion de matières résiduelles and the Stratégie de valorisation de la matière organique. And these frameworks, they aim to end resource waste, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and make all stakeholders accountable. So the provincial goal is to divert and recycle 70% of organic waste by 2030 and to ensure organics are properly managed by 100% of industries, businesses, and institutions. And for this to happen, a regulation to mandate organic waste management is expected. We don't have the date yet, but locally, Montreal's strategies like the Plan Climat the Plan Climat, the Montreal strategic plan, our zero waste commitment with the C40, and our waste management plan, and also our circular economy roadmap. Sorry, they integrate organics diversion as a key lever for climate action. So here we really have that connection. And for example, we've launched a co-creation process with ICNI stakeholders to design measures to reduce food waste, which could include regulatory or incentive-based tools by 2026. And on the other side, on the economic side, there's a provincial levy that acts as a strong financial lever to encourage better waste diversion. A significant share of the revenue collected through this levy is redistributed to municipalities based on their overall waste performance across the territory. So this performance assessment includes not only municipally managed waste streams, but also the waste that is managed privately by ICNIs. This means that when ICNIs improve their organics diversion, it directly contributes to the municipality's performance indicators, and ultimately it's to the amount of funding that we receive that is also affected. So supporting ICNIs in organics diversion is not just an environmental imperative for Montreal, it's also a strategic economic opportunity that strengthens our capacity to deliver sustainable services. If I can make this short, our current function, to answer your question, Joanne, is to provide a collection service to small ICNI organic waste generators, but also foster partnerships and prepare for upcoming regulations from the provincial government, while our objective is to accelerate organics diversion to meet climate and zero waste goals.
Poof, I think you're the envy of most. I can't. I think all of us are salivating maybe over the provincial framework that allows you this mandate to move forward. I just want to pick up on one thing before I move over to Alison and Willow as well. I'm just wondering, Marianne, you said that the city will service the small enterprises that are generating food materials, but not the large one. And I'm not sure how you're setting the threshold between the two. If I'm assuming then the private sector still services the large aspects or large generators, and if that is the case, then um, are you asking for the data then from that sector, and if so, how are you getting it?
What we are offering on the service side is a free weekly organics collection for industries and businesses, generating up to 720 liters per week, which is the equivalent of 3 to 40 liter bins. However, there's for institutions like schools and hospitals, there's no volume limit, but the limit is the collection service itself, where it has to be in bins and it's only once a week. So this model it removes a major barrier for smaller and medium-sized ICNIs by reducing cost and logistical complexity, but some businesses, they generate more or they have to have more frequent collection, and this uh, and the municipal service is not compatible with our operations. So and the other part of your question was relating to how to the data that we collect. So on this, it's a big issue for us because we need to get more data in order to be able to explore different solutions, different policy options, and we found that we have not enough data. And the thing is, we lack access to reliable data on ICNI organics collected by private services. And the municipal data is incomplete since organics are mixed with residential waste and not weighed at collection. So it's we only have a portrait at the tipping point. This makes it difficult to quantify the impact or even build a strong case for municipal involvement. And without this clear picture of the volumes that are involved and or knowing that much of it is already being managed outside our system, whether it's properly or not, it's hard to advocate for targeted solutions and policy change. So there's a need for more data. The level of data that we need is not necessarily granular, like it was mentioned in the question, but we're looking for different ways to gather that data, and we've been actively exploring solutions.
Yeah, that's great. That's certainly a common theme that was mentioned in the research, but that we're hearing, pretty much throughout the country. Willow, do you want to chat a little bit about your municipality's current function or interest in ICNI?
Sure. So the City of Regina, our waste management bylaw will require the ICNI sector to implement multi-stream waste management programs January 2028. So we will require the ICNI sector to implement recycling and organics. There's also different parts of the bylaw that regulate the internal bins that they'll have to have, the signage that they'll have to have, the colors of the bins or the lids to align it with the residential system. We have green for organics, blue for recycling, brown for landfill, so it will have to mirror that. So it's a far way off right now. We originally did have an earlier date set when this was originally approved by council, but due to like a lack of a local processing site, we've had to extend it a couple times. So we'll see how it goes.
There's that chicken and the egg thing, right? Yeah, no, I understand that
Yeah.
completely. Is it the city's vision to also follow support with services, follow the regulation, or are they allowing the generator to make choice?
No, so with the bylaw, like ICNI and multifamily as it is now, we don't provide waste services to those sectors. So they contract with private haulers. And then we're also not being prescriptive in the type of hauling they have to do for organics. So if they don't want to do traditional hauling, if they want to put a digester in or have countertop composters or do like a take-home lunch program with their staff to like their residential green carts, they're welcome to do that. They just need to provide us a waste plan, letting us know whatever it is they're doing to show us that it's being diverted. So it's pretty open to kind like accommodate everyone's needs or different waste generation or things like that. But yeah, so we don't provide any waste services at all for ICNI.
So it's not prescriptive. That makes sense. And more outcomes based. So you're driving the activity and not being prescriptive in terms of how. And I'm assuming then the vision for monitoring will be site visits, that kind of idea, just to try to get an idea of compliance.
Yeah, so when it first rolls out, it's just going to be heavy education. We developed a guide for businesses to implement these systems, how to set them up. So kind of getting that out to all of the businesses, mail outs, site visits, providing them signage, like trying to help with all of those educational supports, ways to talk to the staff on how to use it. And then following probably a year or so of education, we would start requiring waste plans. So right now with the multifamily sector, we don't provide them waste services, but every year they have to submit a waste plan to us to show us that they have recycling in place for their tenants. So it would be a similar it would be like a similar program to that, where
Yeah.
they would have to send in their waste plans, and then we would start doing site visits, and then way down the road, there might be some kind of enforcement and fines and things like that if they weren't adopting. Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys are hosting one of our pilots, and I'm assuming, you know, part of the motivator was to try to
Yes.
gather as much intel and data and use our pilot project
Yes,
to start.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, Alison, over to you. Do you mind giving us a bit of background in terms of your current function and objectives around ICNI Organics?
Yeah, sure. And I am definitely jealous of the folks in Quebec. And I guess I have a more limited one and have to go last, which is kind of a downer.
Nonetheless.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess in terms of our context, like as a city of Edmonton, we have our guiding document, which is our 25-year waste strategy, and that came out in 2019. And it sort of set for us this high-level aspirational goal of seeing 90% diversion across all the sectors, which kind of by default includes IC&I, but we didn't call out any specific goals around IC&I at that point. When it comes to how we do that, our primary focus in Edmonton has always been residential waste services, which for us includes the multi-units like apartments and condos. However, similar to many other municipalities, we don't provide non-residential services, so we don't have a commercial collection service or provide any kind of processing or landfilling. We did used to have some small commercial collections years ago, but around the same time our 25-year waste strategy came out in 2019, we were directed by council to get out of that and just leave it to private sector. So really limiting kind of our exposure to the collection side. We also don't have a municipal landfill within our jurisdictional control anymore. And the province of Alberta doesn't currently have any particular actions or focus to mandate anything around organics. And so really our ability to influence what happens in ICI is kind of limited to our potential role as a regulator or an enabler through leveraging different policy tools like education or incentives or potentially a bylaw. Our 25-year waste strategy did call out the need to introduce an ICI source separated organics bylaw, similar to what we're doing with residents. Kind of as an add-on to the residential green cart programs that we've been rolling out for both the single and the multis. Then COVID kind of happened at the same time. And so we put a bit of a pin in it and it delayed our ability to kind of move forward on that. Since then, and in the last year, we've kind of circled back and really taken the opportunity to examine not just what a bylaw would look like, but kind of zoom out and see what else we can do to support some of that source reduction, food rescued in the diversion side. So we're actually in the process of developing our first IC&I waste roadmap. And the plan is to bring that to council in 2026. And one of the focus areas there is going to be food and organics. So that's kind of the way we're dipping our toe in the water, but we don't have as many exciting things yet as Marian does.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting how it keeps sort of coming back in one way, shape, or form, I'm assuming that the city itself has acknowledged that it doesn't need to wait in the absence of a provincial mandate or a whole of private approach that Marianne has the benefit of in Quebec. It still means that you can move forward in your capacity with bylaws potentially. So interesting levers that you can still introduce. It's a question of, you know, motivation and timing as well. So thanks for that backdrop, each of you. And maybe I can just sort of open it up to any of you to sort of react to the barriers and the challenges that you heard us uncover in our research. Pardon me, if any of them were familiar to you, and do they resonate in your own circumstances, and which of them, you know, really surface to the top? Do you want to start? And, you know, just open your mic and please, we'll be relaxed. Yeah, please, Marianne, go ahead.
Yeah, so there are two challenges that really stood out as aligning with our experience here in Montreal. And first, there's the financial barriers. Organics collection costs more than disposal in the Montreal region, and with higher tipping fees for composting or AD than for landfilling, even with the landfill levy. So this makes it hard to promote diversion as economically efficient. And we do offer the services to relatively small generators, but the biggest barrier is with SMEs that produce too much organic waste to be included in the municipal collection, yet not enough to justify the cost of private services. And we found in a previous study that this segment is made of 65% restaurants, and it's a sector with low profit margins, which makes the added cost a major hurdle. And second, the other element that really talks to us is the data limitations, as I was mentioning before. But like I said, we've been exploring solutions around, especially around data transparency, and maybe I can get to this aspect later, or maybe if we don't have enough time now. But it's another interesting aspect I would like to talk about.
Yeah, I think data, gaps in data is a universal challenge for sure, but it's interesting. I know one of the things that we struggle with in the pilots is, quite frankly, just the diversity of the types of generators and the amounts that they generate, and therefore the different aspects of the service they need, whether it's a dedicated route, whether it's once a week, twice a week. So and those where you've got cheap disposal, it's a very difficult, in the absence of policy, it's a very difficult thing to compel, especially in this time where we're talking about, affordability. But nonetheless, we are this is why we took a community-based approach, and really this idea of sharing the cost of collection amongst all the generators and right-sizing that cost. Willow, any specific barriers that were spoken about in the presentation resonate with you?
I think you did mention like local processing as one of them, or in the absence of government regulations, there not being processors popping up or something like that at some point. So that's honestly been our biggest barrier. It's been not like our only barrier, but what has made everything quite a bit more difficult is the lack of a local processor for organics. Saskatoon experienced the same issues as us when we both rolled out our green card programs. The processors which we had contracted with, neither of them were able to get the required building permits due to just kind of like the attitude or ideas people have about organics and not wanting it in their backyard. So there was a lot of pushback from kind of like the community. And so we have both municipalities did end up taking it in-house, but then it's not scalable when we're trying to regulate multifamily and ICNI. So we're back out to RFP now, and have been kind of in this process for years. So just definitely like the industry not keeping up with the regulations. Like as we're trying to roll things out, there it just doesn't exist. So we can't ask businesses to start doing it until it's there. But then how is it profitable for them when the regulations aren't in yet? So like the capital investments they would have to make to have the site to eventually take the material, like, so it's just, yeah.
Yeah, the timing is everything there, but interesting. The engagement and really the point around not in my backyard, the disconnect maybe for the public that, they probably want the service and they're probably willing to participate in it, but you need a place to put the stuff. And so, that has to be maybe part of the education or the engagement messaging in terms of the benefits of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns about odor and rodents and things like that. So yeah, just kind of, yeah.
Interesting. Alison, from you?
Oh, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I think a lot of the challenges in the presentation resonated with us. Also, kind of particularly going back to your comment about kind of lack of mandate from the province and our ability to bring forward regulation. I think it is true you don't necessarily have to wait for the province to make a move to introduce regulation. But in our case, because the province hasn't kind of tackled organics and the landfilling prices here are so low, it does kind of create this market environment that we're in, or the lack of regulatory environment that we're in, that doesn't drive the market to create any additional processing, even with or without our regulation. So as a single municipality, it sort of loads the conversation a little bit more to us to say, like, what is that economic hill we're trying to drive the conversation up if there isn't a lot of support there in the market? That means there's no it's really cheap to do the wrong thing, I guess. And so as a municipality, you're trying to work with timing, that chicken and the egg. Like, we can introduce bylaw that will influence our market, but then we'll still have to have a left lead time to allow any processors to scale up. And then, what can we offer in terms of those economic barriers? Because until everybody's doing it, it can't set that level playing field for everybody. So I think we're also kind of caught up in that same similar chicken and egg. Like, we don't have to wait for the province to make a move, but without it, market pricing is so low.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the envy of having a disposal levy, as Marian does in the city of Montreal and the province of Quebec, changes the economics. Obviously, not only that, but it generates that necessary injection of funding that can be repurposed to try to build that scale, to support the collection, and then ultimately the capital capex that comes with building processing infrastructure. So that one tool does so many things along the way. And I think, I'm going to make some assumptions. I'm from Winnipeg originally, and so I know that communities are far apart in rural and western provinces. And so even if you were to make friends with your neighboring municipalities, could you build that economies of scale? And can you come up with a governance or a finance model to share that capex if between you, and how do those services link in? We had the benefit of sort of exploring that a little bit with the Strathcona County, Edmonton, Westlock corridor there. That's ultimately what we were trying to do, to see if we could bring those like-minded municipalities together, and still interested in exploring that. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop it there, but to thank you all, first of all, for the leadership that you're taking in your respective communities. So much to learn from you as you move forward with that leadership, and the support that you've showed with our organization and bringing the pilots to your respective cities and jurisdictions as well. We're so keen to continue to work with you, and to watch Marian, you lead the charge with moving forward in this kind of complicated environment that you're dealing with as well. And I know that we're almost at time. I'm compelled to mention, correct, Maggie, that we're going to be following up this email or this webinar with the release of the actual report to the public. We'd be very keen for anybody who's participated today to give us feedback on the report itself. And CIC will be taking all of the findings and then creating our policy roadmap for IC&I diversion in a Canadian context forward. And so more to come from us on the policy side as well. So thank you very much, Marian, Willow, Alison, for being with us, taking time. Maggie, Savina, your expertise and all of your efforts and details. Open to chat to anybody post-webinar, and we thank our partners, ECCC, for the support as well to undertake this piece of work. And we bid you all adieu and a good day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.